Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, welcoming you all to a brand new Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. However, today it is not I who will be flying, but once again we shine the spotlight on one of our subscribers. Today's replay comes courtesy of fellow DMH member EagleKnife4321, who we shall refer to as Eagle from this point forward. Eagle is flying out in his Spitfire LF Mark 9 on the air domination map Malta. It is most likely he is using the following setup: a 300 meter gun convergence with air target belts for 20mm cannons and tracer belts for the 7.7mm machine guns. For his fuel load he most likely has a 20 or 30 minute fuel load. And straight away, for all of you who are aware, at a tier of 4 and a battle rating of 5.3, the Spitfire LF Mark 9 has a very powerful climb rate and is sometimes credited as having one of the best climb rates for a prop in the game. Eagle is putting this to good use climbing onto the side of the map and distancing himself from the central furball. You can take one of two approaches. I personally prefer climbing over the centre of the map if possible in order to intimidate the enemy and not give away what my intentions are, other than that perhaps I want to go for a head on at the early stages of the game and then I can back away. Side climbing provides you with distance on the enemy team, but you have to be aware of the fact that some opponents may look for you and proceed to interdict you. Fortunately for Eagle this has not been the case, meaning he can now meander back into the furball and notices an XP-50 being pursued by 4 fellow planes. The XP-50 is wiped off the map, and his spatial awareness is staying alive here as he notices the B-17 that there are fighters on the enemy and friendly team disintegrating left, right and centre. He gets close enough to engage the B-17E late edition and burns it to pieces. With the left wing fully engorged in flames, Eagle now breaks off. Having received just a graze from the rear facing 12.7mm machine guns, he now breaks around to see another Messerschmitt 109 just explode right in front of him. Now he latches onto the back of a P-47 D-28, whereby the P-47 is engrossed in engaging one of his fellow aircraft but has now had to break off. Going up, the P-47 is unaware of Eagle's continued presence and falls victim as a second kill. 2 kills in under a minute, we could say. Quite a good start. Eagle now breaks away and picks up a little bit more altitude, as he's dropped away from 3,700 metres to just below 2,000 and is now regaining that altitude. Most likely also taking a reload at this point, he surveys the situation. And as we can see, what is common to most air domination matches, that there is usually a central furball, which can either occur up at moderate altitudes, i.e. in the region of 1,000 metres all the way up to 3,000 metres, or the furball will drop all the way down to just ground level, i.e. somewhere between 0 metres altitude and 750 metres altitude. This means that the games can be quite dangerous, especially if you like to get in the thick of things, simply because you only need to make one wrong decision and you may have an opponent latched onto your tail. But, for the case of Eagle, we can see his plan cool so far, looking around and constantly using spatial awareness to his advantage. He picks up on enemy planes coming out of the spawn and decides to break around, surveying the scene down below him instead, as it would seem that a good portion of the furball has now proceeded to those lower altitude regions, which are outside of the capture zone but at the same time need to be controlled in order to win the game. He latches onto the back of an enemy fighter, which we have not seen the identification of yet, and soon begins to open fire. It's a F6F 190 A8, and the A8 is unable to break away and is very quickly taken out for Eagle's third kill. It's at this point that Eagle breaks up, and used a boom and zoom play in order to take out his opponent. He loops around with a good portion of energy retained. At approximately a speed of 525 km an hour, he unfortunately sees 2 enemy fighter aircraft ripped to pieces in front of him. It would seem that his friendly team members are doing a lot of good work, and it would seem that his team in general are very proactive in this match, and sometimes you need to be proactive in order to win an air dom game from the outset. He notices F6F 190 A8 now coming up towards him and proceeds to a head on. A very risky close range pass, and I would say both pilots were firing within their convergence, i.e. firing before their guns could converge, and that is why neither pilot did any damage. Additionally, we noticed that Eagle's cannons have run out of ammunition. He is relying on 7.7mm machine gun fire here, and the armour plating of the F6F 190 A8 is probably keeping it alive. And this means that whilst Eagle is grazing the A8, he is not doing any overall damage. And this is unfortunate, but perhaps to be expected at the higher tier levels, simply because the 7.7s may not quite cut it anymore by comparison with the earlier tiers with the likes of the Hawker Hurricane. Nonetheless, having broken off and seen that the F6F 190 A8 is being pursued by multiple friendlies now, Eagle reinstates his position, climbing once again and gaining speed gradually, using the Spitfire LF Mark 9's traits to full effect. We've already seen a combination of tight turn fighting or manoeuvrability based fighting and some boom and zoom tactics, and hopefully this will continue, as it is a stellar start, despite the fact we are almost halfway through the game. Looking around, he notices a number of enemy fighters coming out of the spawn and engaging his friendlies, but at the same time, for every enemy fighter in the engagement, there's one or two more friendlies it would seem, or at least we can see on screen. Breaking around, Eagle knows it's time to get back in. He's most likely finished reloading his 20mm cannons and needs to pick off another target in order to sate his first for an ace in a day. Climbing and heading up towards 3000 meters altitude, we can see he's optimising his position by ensuring that with altitude he can gain a little bit more of an advantage, but he detects an enemy fighter which was up to his left and has broken around instead. Trying to get onto the back of an enemy fighter, perhaps pushing its way through the furball and towards his friendly spawn. He unfortunately cannot pick up on the back of a P-47D Thunderbolt, nor can he pick up on the back of a Messerschmitt 9 that seems to have been shot down. Hold on a second, he spotted it once again, my mistake. And the Messerschmitt 9G heads towards a head-on with a friendly Focke 190A and rips it to pieces, and Eagle's going for the revenge kill now. The 109G is being harassed by a friendly on Eagle's team, but Eagle's not had enough and wants to cut it to pieces. He shattered its cooling system and now bursts it into flames. The 109G is not dead quite yet, and Eagle's going to use this as a method to escape from the midst of a furball engagement. Following the Messerschmitt 9G down, he clearly wants to get payback. The G's burning, and with a friendly latching on, Eagle comes around once again. We should note at this point that whilst he is in a way obsessing over the target, he is within friendly territory, and as a result this has not compromised his overall game plan, as he adds a 4th kill to his tally. He now goes dead vertical with all of the energy that he picked up in the midst of that engagement, i.e. going down to lower altitudes, and regains his altitude position incredibly quickly, most likely applying war emergency power here in order to increase his altitude without compromising too much of his overall speed straight away. Levelling out, Eagle now cuts his engine. Now I do not know why this is. This could potentially just simply be because of the damage that he received from the Focke 190A8 in that initial head-on. Alternatively, he's cooling the engine down and surveying the situation. He's looking around to see what exactly both teams are doing. And it would seem that the friendly team is gaining overall supremacy now, with the number of enemy dots gradually declining, although there is still work to be done. We can see a P-51's just appeared towards the end of the map, and that is most likely from the enemy spawn. We cannot tell where the locations are of course on this replay, and we have to surmise, and where Messerschmitt 19 also appearing over in the distance, we can say that's where the enemy spawn is. And now Eagle's going to break down towards this F8F, who is quickly dispatched unfortunately by a friendly fighter. Eagle's going to have to pick a bit different target, and one that's not being harassed in order to get his ace in a day. I know the feeling, it's quite difficult sometimes when you just want to get that easy kill, but you sometimes got to work for it. And so now we press on. Eagle once again goes to climb, heading up towards 3000 meters altitude, and it seems to be a mainstay position for himself in a air domination game. This makes sense, and he notices a B-17. He'll continue climbing towards it, but our friendly Focke 190, the Japanese premium one, the A5, is going to intercept the B-17 well before Eagle can make it there. So we cannot use the bomber to obtain our 5th kill. Excuse me. So what do we do in this situation? Well, Eagle's solution is going to be to pick on some of the targets that are fresh and coming into the battle. He begins to break down, and picks up on a P-47D25 that is in a low energy state. We can see the P-47 pilot is having to limp the plane into a level position, and gradually picks the nose up, but it's too late as Eagle rips the P-47 apart to pick up his ace in a day. If he'd cut that any tighter, P-47 may have done some severe damage to his plane, but he was fortunate here and timed it very well. Breaking away, we have a Focke 190 trying to catch up to Eagle, but we can see how the Spitfire is able to pull ground, thanks to the fact it's come from a higher altitude position and therefore has a superior energy state. He now breaks around, noticing a number of enemy fighters heading towards him it would seem, or at least coming up from the lower altitudes and been harassed by his friendlies. We start with this A8 here, who has actually turned away and gone after one of his friendly Focke 190s instead. Eagle dives down, and the 190 A8 starts to break along. But Eagle this time is going to latch onto the back of him and use his superior manoeuvrability to keep on the back of the A8 and cut it apart for kill number 6. Very good turn there and very good lead means that he's able to add one more to the tally, as he now has another Focke 190 that is baying for his blood. The 190 goes for a head on, and Eagle reacts a little late as he goes into a snap roll but takes some nasty damage to his right wing. He's now got a B-25 also trying to do the same, and he snap rolls more successfully out of the way of this B-25. The 190 A8 is trying to come around, and the B-25 is as well, acting in the gunship role. The A8 has been dispatched by a friendly, and an Eagle opens up on the B-25, hoping to cut it down. The elevator has been ripped off, the left engine is on fire, but as we come along, we see that he adds one more to the tally, making it 7-0. Can he get any more? Well, we'll just have to find out. The game is in its closing stages. We see a Messerschmitt 109 off in the distance chasing a friendly Focke-Wulf 190, but is very far away. And with Eagle's position being more orientated towards the enemy spawn, he needs to be more aware of the opponents coming in rather than those on the horizon. He cuts his engine once again, and this may actually indicate either a fuel leak or some severe engine damage coming on the horizon. And this means that Eagle is going to have to play it safe. We see the P-51 get shredded in front of him, and he makes his way towards the enemy spawn once again. The plane's got a slight right tilt, but this is not going to deter him as he breaks over the top of what was another Focke-Wulf 190A trying to cut up underneath him, and he now goes head to head with a P-51D. Snap rolling, avoiding the fire from the P-51, who is cut to pieces by a friendly Focke-Wulf 190 Dora. My apologies, an F. And now looking around, we see another enemy plane, the Messerschmitt 109 from earlier that was off on the horizon chasing a friendly Focke-Wulf 190, and the F is coming in guns range, and Eagle opens up. Unfortunately, he can't quite get the kill as all of his team swarm on the Messerschmitt 109. And as we see again with the F6F Bearcat here, everybody swarmed on top of it, and Eagle picks up 2 assists to his tally, but can't quite get the kill on either of them. The game's now coming to its end. We've only got approximately 30 seconds left, and he's deploying the victory smoke, or the aerobatic smoke we should say, as clearly his team have achieved domination over Malta. Quite a tense yet methodical game. Let us now proceed to look at the stats screens before providing our final analysis. With a respectable 7-0, especially seeing as Eagle was in the thick of it for the majority of the game. Let us now move on to the areas for improvement and the positives. As always, starting with the positives, of which we have 3 for today, we begin on the concept of spatial awareness, i.e. the ability to provide a 360-degree view to your plane and therefore be aware of the opponents who may try to bounce you, latch onto your 6, or who are viable targets in the future. Throughout the course of this game, Eagle showed very good spatial awareness, and at such a high calibre it meant that he never went into an engagement where he was on an equal footing with his opponent, if not in an advantageous position. We saw this whether he went into head-ons against Focke-Wulf 190 A8, or alternatively bounced onto the back of a Messerschmitt 109G. Eagle was always looking around him, and when he was not looking around he was most likely looking at his mini-map to make sure he could climb at will, position himself at will, and then move into an engagement at his own pace. We never saw any enemy fighter bounce onto his tail. Even with the rather superior friendly presence in the skies, this also required a good portion of spatial awareness, as even when you have multiple friendlies around you, it only takes one enemy fighter to single you out from the group, and Eagle's survivability was dependent on his spatial awareness here. This brings us on to our second point then, which is Eagle's overall ability to see the bigger picture. We define seeing the bigger picture as an involvement of spatial awareness. It is all well and good for you to be able to identify targets and potential threats, but you need to also be able to identify those enemies in the scope of what your friendly fighters are doing. For example, if we take a generic one, you see an enemy fighter in the distance, but you see that 2 of your friendlies are about to engage it. Do you really want to latch onto the back of this enemy fighter as well, and essentially make it so that 3 of your team are engaging a single enemy, whilst the enemy are free to latch onto your tails and shoot you down as an example? This is seeing the bigger picture. Eagle demonstrated this straight from the start. We saw with the XP50, he initially singled it out, but then changed his mind having noticed that 4 friendlies were about to take it apart. And this was to continue throughout the game. On a number of occasions, he did point his guns towards an opponent that was coming in range, but quickly disengaged before opening fire when he saw that multiple friendlies, or indeed single friendlies, were about to knock the opponent out. And this is the ability to see the bigger picture. He expended ammo on targets of opportunity that were viable ones and not ones being shot down by his friendlies, or most likely to be eliminated by friendly fighters in the very close future. We now move on to our third and final point, and this is the concept of knowing the plane strengths. We see this with most Ace in the Day gameplays on this channel. that the player will know the strengths of their fighter and be able to manipulate them. The Spitfire LF Mark 9, in my experience from what I've seen in test flights and indeed from friendly and enemy fighters in multiple games, is an evolvement of the Spitfire F Mark 9 and can place itself in that all-rounder role with a preference towards a more manoeuvrability based fight than boom and zoom. But throughout this game we saw that Eagle interchange between manoeuvrability based fighting, or indeed keeping tight to his opponents and then opening fire, or alternatively using boom and zoom tactics on a more linear scale when and where appropriate. And this enabled him, for the most part, to pick up his 7 kills and 2 assists in the end without having to compromise his overall game plan. And indeed he showed the Spitfire LF Mark 9 some respect, and the Spitfire gave it in return with a decent kill count. But for all of our strengths we should always strive to improve, and today is no exception. To kickstart our first of 2 areas of improvement today, we consider Eagle's head-on technique. As a whole it was rather good. The concept of going head to head, opening fire very briefly as soon as you hit that 0.77 km range, at which point the targeting reticules appear, and then using a snap roll to evade any return fire. After this snap roll, Eagle would come around on a 180 degree turn and either catch his opponent in the midst of a turn fight or pursue them down to the earth. However, with the higher tier and battle rating position of the Spitfire LF Mark 9 and indeed Eagle's lineup in general, if we have to evaluate based on this aircraft, we would say that this is perhaps a dangerous technique to employ, simply because a number of players up at the higher tiers and the more experienced players will open fire in a head-on well before the 0.77 km distance. I myself will open fire in a head-on out to a distance of 1.4 km, especially if I'm using cannons or 12.7mm machine guns. And this burst can catch you by surprise in a head-on and indeed eviscerate your plane, alternatively force you to evade much earlier on. To improve then, Eagle needs to employ his snap roll a little bit earlier, i.e. at a distance of perhaps 0.9 km, in order to evade any hidden fire that may be coming at him from a longer distance, especially if players are using stealth belts. On top of this, it would not hurt to perhaps spray a small amount of fire from a distance of 1 km at the opponent, as this may cause them to evade, or pretend to evade any incoming fire, or at the same time it may actually cause them some damage. If the Focke-Wulf 190 A8 in particular, the second one that Eagle went head to head with today, had not opened fire at 0.77 km, but say a distance of 900 metres, we may have found that Eagle's plane would not have just received a graze to its right wing, but something far, far worse. For our second area of improvement, we come on to the concept of reload timing, i.e. knowing when to go for a reload so that your guns are all available when you go into your next engagement. One occasion in particular stands to mind here, and that is the first head-on engagement with a Focke-Wulf 190 A8, where Eagle only had his machine guns available, and this meant that when he did gain the upper hand and get onto the Focke-Wulf 6, he could not bring it down, but merely sprinkle it with machine gun fire. If 1 or 2 20mm cannon rounds had been available, this could have been a different outcome. And this was due to perhaps not using the time between the previous engagement and this one to enact a reload, or at least kick-start it, meaning he may have had his 20mm cannons available halfway through that engagement. However, this is a circumstance-based concept, whereby if you do not have much time between engagements, as you can see that another opponent is coming in to engage you, then you will have to live with the fact you do not have certain guns available. And additionally, this is also reliant on your crew's reload skill. But nonetheless, this is something to take away and perhaps work on, or at least pay a little bit more attention to your available ammo capacity. Nonetheless, despite these areas of potential improvement, I highly enjoyed this game and I thank you for sending this game in, Eagle. It is very clear that you enjoy flying your Spitfire LF Mark 9, and indeed you are a capable pilot with it. If you integrate these areas of potential improvement, in my opinion, you'll be an even more devastating fighter in the skies and will be a menace to bomber and fighter alike. For you the viewer, if you feel I've been too harsh or too light on Eagle's gameplay, why not let me know in the comments section below. And indeed if you want to submit your own replays for me to take a look at when I have the time, take a look in the description and you'll find out how to submit one. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you have enjoyed the video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Yet until next time, take care and good luck in the skies!